I was fuming, absolutely boiling over, and most of that anger was directed at my wife, Emily. "My name's John, John Harper." How did I know she was upset? Well, she was practically glued to the car door, trying to keep as much distance from me as possible, her face twisted into a glare that could make your skin crawl. Why was she so mad? I guess I couldn't blame her. I had really messed up her evening, and boy, did I feel awful about it. I had embarrassed her, the woman I'd been married to for a decade and the mother of our 3 kids, in front of a room full of people. It was a real boneheaded mistake on my part. So, what exactly did I do to mess things up? I picked up the wrong key. Here's the deal. Our neighbors, the Wilsons, are known for throwing wild parties, and Emily had been dying to attend one. She finally managed to get an invite through some connections. We had never been to one of their shindigs before, but what she didn't mention to me, even though we've been together for 10 years, was that this party was different. Apparently, at this party, the wives were supposed to toss their house keys into a bowl, and the husbands would pick one at random, heading off with the wife whose key they grabbed for some, well, extracurricular activities. As the night started winding down, the reality of what was about to happen hit me, and I lost it. I had never been so angry at Emily. I yanked her into the kitchen by the arm. "Did you know this party was gonna end like this?" I asked, barely keeping my voice in check. She gave me this smug little grin. "Yeah, I knew. And you thought it was a good idea not to tell me?" I demanded. "Of course," she shrugged, "because I knew you would not come if you knew." "You are right about that, but I always have a choice." "Let's go." "We cannot just leave now," Emily argued. "It would be rude. Besides, it is just one night. It'll spice up our marriage." "Yeah, well, I could do without that kind of spice." "We're leaving," I repeated, this time more firmly. Emily protested, but I was already done with the conversation. I walked over to the bowl full of keys, grabbed the one with the red cover, our key, and held it up for everyone to see. "Nobody told me about this part of the night," I announced loudly. "I'm not sharing my wife." The room fell silent, and I could feel people's eyes on me as I waved our key in the air. I take my vows seriously, and I do not believe in cheating. A few people muttered under their breath, some even shooting me dirty looks, but I did not care. I turned to my wife, whose face had turned bright red with anger and embarrassment. "Emily," I said, "you need to decide right now. You can come with me and leave this mess behind, or you can stay and never come home." "But I am leaving." Everyone's attention shifted to her. She hesitated before speaking up. "I'm sorry for my husband's behavior," she told the group. "I really wanted to stay, but I guess I had better go." She was furious, and I could see it, but she followed me out to the car anyway. "You are such a selfish jerk," she shouted as soon as we got inside. "How could you humiliate me like that in front of everyone? We will never be invited back." "Humiliate you?" I shot back. "What about you? You embarrassed me by not telling me you planned on being with another guy tonight. You would have been with someone else, too, John. It would have been fun for both of us," she said, not backing down. "I do not want to be with another woman, Emily. That is something I reserve for you." After 10 years of marriage, it hit me like a punch to the gut that she would even want to be with someone else. "It would have just been this one time, John," she tried again. "We've been together for so long, what is one night with another person? After all, I have been a good wife for 10 years. Don't you think that is fair?" "No, Emily, I do not," I said, my voice firm. "I cannot believe you even think this is reasonable, but it is clear this means a lot to you, does it?" "It does," she admitted quietly. "I have been looking forward to this for weeks. It is my chance to feel like more than just a wife and a mother, to have some fun, be desired by someone else for a change." I slammed on the brakes, made a sharp U-turn, and sped right back toward the Wilsons' house. Emily let out a scream when I turned the car around. "What are you doing, John?" she snapped at me. "If spending a night with some other guy means that much to you, then go ahead," I said, pulling up in front of the Wilsons' house. From the looks of it, all the other cars were still there. "Looks like you are not too late to get in on the fun," I added. "Go ahead, get out, and have yourself a night with some random guy. I hope he gives you what I can't." "John, it is just something new, a bit of adventure," she said, her hand moving toward the door handle. "You are perfect for me, but you know I cannot do this alone. We both have to participate, me with someone new, and you too." "I told you already, I'm not interested in any of this, Emily," I said firmly. "I have never cheated on you, and I never will, not unless we are no longer married." Her expression changed, her tone softening. "What does that mean, John?" she asked quietly. "It means exactly what it sounds like," I replied. "It is decision time for you, Emily." She paused, clearly thinking it over. "Would you pick me up tomorrow morning?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You know, from wherever I end up. I'll call you. It would mean a lot to me." "Not a chance," I answered, cold as ice. "I am sure your new guy will be happy to give you a ride home after spending the night with you." "You are making this sound worse than it is, John," she said, her eyes welling up with tears. "He is not going to be my lover. It is just one night of closeness. I love you, John. You are the only man for me." "Do you really believe that, Emily?" I asked, not hiding the disbelief in my voice. "There's no way you can love me and do what you're planning. Let me get this straight, you just want some new guy for a fling, right? You want a new guy to get you pregnant?" "That's harsh, John," she said, tears starting to spill over. "You know I'm on birth control. It's not about that. It's just one night with someone new. It'll be exciting. I won't let you ruin this for me, John." Her voice had regained some firmness. "I just want a little bit of time with someone else, and you are not going to stop me. I am going through with it, and you need to accept that. Got it? Tomorrow morning, I will be back, and I will make you forget all about tonight," she said with a false confidence in her voice. "You will still want me, John. I'll make sure of it. I will not want you anymore after you let another man have what I thought was mine alone," I said, the hurt and betrayal thick in my words. "Now you're just being ridiculous, John," she shot back, sounding exasperated. "I belong to you, and you will still want me. I'll make sure of it." "Emily, listen to me," I said, my voice more urgent now. "If you walk back into that house, we are done. Your one night is going to cost you your marriage and your family." "No, John, it will not," she said, her tone still filled with that forced confidence. "We are married, and we are staying that way. We are meant to be together. I love you, and I know you love me. We will get through this, I promise." "You are breaking my heart, Emily," I said, barely able to keep my voice steady. "Stop being so dramatic, John," she replied, now clearly irritated. "Think of it as letting me go on a little adventure." "It might be an adventure for you, but it's the end for us," I said, my voice final. She opened the car door and began to step out. "I will see you tomorrow morning, John," she said, still trying to sound sure of herself. I just shook my head sadly, and as soon as she closed the door, I hit the gas, tires screeching as I sped away, leaving skid marks down the street. I caught a glimpse of her in the rearview mirror. She was standing there on the sidewalk, completely shocked, her mouth hanging open. She had not even moved by the time I turned the corner and she disappeared from sight. I hoped she would call me right away, admit she was wrong, and beg me to come back for her. But she did not. Oh, she probably figured I would cool off in a day or two and she could make everything right by getting me back in bed. Well, she could not have been more wrong. My dad always used to say, if a woman is even thinking about cheating, she has already crossed that line in her mind. And if she's serious about it, she has already broken her vows. It is one thing to admire someone, but if she is planning how to make it happen, she has already betrayed you. As painful as it was to face, Emily had just ended our marriage, and it was time for me to move forward. The real heartbreak was thinking about our 3 kids, Emma, who's 10, Olivia, who's 7, and little Johnny, only 3. How could I imagine not seeing them every day? But at the same time, I knew I couldn't let Emily's actions slide without consequences. The kids were staying with my mom for the weekend, which gave me some time to figure out my next steps. I drove around for a while, aimlessly, still hoping Emily might call and ask me to come get her, but it was becoming painfully clear she had made up her mind. Eventually, I decided on a plan and headed home. Just as I pulled into the driveway, my phone rang. My heart jumped, thinking it might be Emily, but when I saw the caller ID, I knew it wasn't her. I answered anyway. There was loud music and laughter in the background, and then a man's voice came through the line. "Hey, John, it's Mark from the party you left," the voice said. "Emily gave me your number. She's real excited about tonight and wants you to come back and be part of it too. You're a lucky guy. Every man here is hoping they'll get her key. She's been saying someone's in for an unforgettable night. You ought to come back, there are some real hot ladies here eager to have fun with you." "Go to hell, Mark," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "And tell everyone else at your party, including my cheating wife, to rot. I hope you all get what's coming to you." I slammed the phone down and went inside the house. In less than 20 minutes, I had 2 suitcases packed with enough clothes for a week or 2. I grabbed my laptop, my shaving kit, and loaded everything into the car. After that, I dug out our marriage license and tore it into pieces. Then I took my wedding ring, placed it on the table, and smashed it with a hammer. It took a few good hits to flatten it, but once I did, I laid the broken pieces on Emily's pillow, locked the door, and drove off into the night. I figured I'd find a motel a few miles outside of town. But first, I swung by the Wilsons' place again. Some cars had already left, and a few people were outside, pairing off and chatting. I didn't see Emily, so I figured she had either left with her new partner or was inside with Mark Wilson himself. The motel I ended up finding was in the next town over. It wasn't much to look at, but it had parking in the back, which meant my car would be out of sight if anyone came looking for it. After I checked in, I bought a 6-pack of beer from the convenience store next door and settled down to watch some TV. The first couple of beers helped calm my nerves, and by the time I cracked open the third one, my phone rang. It was Emily. I let it go to voicemail, knowing she wasn't calling to ask me to pick her up. Her voice filled the message, casual and clueless as ever. "John, you're being so dramatic about all of this," Emily said, her voice slightly slurred. "Mark told me what you said to him. I've told you 1,000 times it's just for one night. It's just a little something different with one guy, and that doesn't make me a bad person. I promise, even if I'm a little sore, I'll make it up to you when I get home tomorrow." Her words were like daggers, but she kept talking, oblivious. "Since you took our house key out of the bowl, they made me a new one. The guy who picked it is named Greg. He's married, with kids, just like us. Since you're back at our place, I went home with him." She actually giggled. "His wife and her partner are in another part of the house, far enough away that we won't hear each other when things get, heated. You know how loud I can be when we're together." She giggled again. "I know you're mad, but I promise, I'm not gonna let him do anything we haven't already done. I told Greg to keep it simple, maybe just the basics. He agreed, since it's my first time with someone else." She finished with, "He'll drop me off tomorrow, and I'll clean up before I come home. No sloppy seconds for you. Sweet dreams, lover. See you in the morning." I felt like I was going to throw up. I couldn't believe I had been married to such a fool. Sure, Emily had always been a bit naive, that used to be part of what made her endearing, but now her cluelessness had destroyed everything. There was no way she could think I'd ever take her back after letting another man have her and then rubbing it in my face. I was sure everyone at that party had been laughing at me the whole time, and my wife didn't even care. I knew I should have just ignored the message and let it be. But I couldn't help myself. I called her back, and after a few rings, she answered. "Hey, honey, Glenn and I just got cozy in bed, so I can't talk for long," Emily said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Shut up, Emily," I snapped, my voice filled with cold anger. "This might be the last time you ever hear from me. You don't even realize what you've done, but you'll figure it out soon enough. Enjoy your night with Glenn, because the consequences are going to be worse than you can imagine. Let me be clear, Emily. Once Glenn touches you, our marriage is over. Do you hear me? Over." I never thought I'd say it, but right now, I hate you more than I ever loved you, I continued, every word coming from a place of deep pain and betrayal. I can't wait to be done with you completely. Expect to hear from my lawyer next week. I hung up, and within 30 seconds, she called me back. I let it go to voicemail. "John, why are you acting like this?" Emily's voice trembled on the voicemail, sounding like she was about to cry. "How could you say those things to me? I'm your wife. Can't you just let me have this one night? Glenn and I just started, and now you're ruining it for me. I don't know if I can even enjoy being with him like I wanted to. We're not getting divorced. I'll be home in the morning, and we can talk this out." She paused, her voice softer but still determined. "I'd come home now, but I promised Glenn I'd stay the night with him. Please try to understand, honey. I have to do this. He got my key, and I promised him he could have me. He really wants that, and we're just getting started." Her tone shifted again, turning more intimate. "Oh God, yes, listen, John. Please understand. See you in the morning." I felt my stomach turn. I couldn't believe she was so far gone, so blind to what she was doing to us. I should have ignored her message, but I couldn't resist. I called her back, and it rang a few times before going to voicemail. She was clearly busy with Glenn, fully wrapped up in what she was doing. "From your last voicemail, I can tell Glenn's with you, and you're enjoying every minute of it," I said, my voice cold as ice. "You can go ahead and spend the whole night with him, experiencing whatever new thrills he gives you. But you couldn't keep the one promise that mattered to me, the man who loved you and stayed faithful for more than 10 years. I don't even recognize you anymore. You won't be seeing me in the morning, and you might not see me ever again. But you'll be served divorce papers next week, and I'll be charging you with adultery. Now that Glenn is doing what only I should have been allowed to do, you've crossed the line. You're officially a cheater, Emily. You can be with whoever you want from here on out, but I'll never be with you again." Emily didn't call back. I knew how she got during times like this, completely absorbed in the moment, lost in her own world with the man she was with. I was sure by now they were fully focused on each other. I finished the rest of the six-pack, the beer numbing the pain a little. Eventually, I fell asleep, tears still slipping down my face. I woke up a few hours later, the full weight of reality crashing down on me. My wife had taken a lover, and now I had to figure out how to protect my kids, get her out of my life, and make sure everyone at that party felt just as miserable as I did. Living in a small town in Nevada, I knew the law allowed for divorce on the grounds of adultery. I could possibly avoid paying alimony and maybe even get custody of the kids. I needed a good lawyer, and I needed one fast. I took a long shower, put on some fresh clothes, and around 7:30, I called my mom to fill her in on what had happened. She was just as shocked as I was about Emily's actions. She had the kids for the weekend and promised she wouldn't say anything to them. I told her I'd pick them up once I had a plan in place. As much as it hurt to admit, Emily had been a good mother and wife, up until last night. After hanging up with my mom, I headed over to the diner nearby for breakfast. As I was pulling into the parking lot and making my way to the door, my phone rang. It was Emily. I hesitated but decided to let it go to voicemail. She didn't leave a message the first time, but she immediately called again and again, over and over, until finally, she left one, sobbing. "John, please, answer the phone. Talk to me," Emily begged, her voice breaking. "What do you mean you might never see me again? And why are you talking about divorce papers? You can't leave me, John. We have 3 beautiful kids who need both of us. Why did you tear up our marriage license and smash your wedding ring? I gave you that ring on our wedding day, and you promised to wear it forever. It's a symbol of our eternal love. I knew you'd be upset with me, but I never imagined you'd go this far, John. I love you so much, but I really needed that special night with Glenn. It meant everything to me. He made me feel alive again, like I was young. I'd forgotten how thrilling it can be to laugh and scream at the same time." Her voice cracked, and she continued, "But as amazing as last night was, John, you're still the only man for me. I know how to make it up to you, to heal those hurt feelings. Please, come home so I can show you how much I love you and fix this." She started sobbing, her words becoming harder to understand. "John, why can't you see? I just needed that one night with someone else to feel desired again. That's all it was, a moment. Nothing more. Please, John, talk to me. I love you. You and our kids mean everything to me." Her voice weakened, trailing off into quiet sobs as the voicemail ended. I stood there outside the diner, completely shocked. Had Emily been feeling this way all through our marriage, and it had just now come to the surface in her mid-30s? Emily was still stunning, no doubt about that. She stood about 5'5", weighing around 130 pounds, with her dark blonde hair falling to her shoulders and light blue eyes. She had a great figure, and even after 3 kids, she still turned heads wherever she went. Her hips were a little wider now, sure, but that only added to her beauty. So what was all this about needing to feel wanted by another man? I had always made sure she knew how much I loved and desired her. I brought her flowers, took her out on dates at least once a week, and told her every single day how beautiful she was and how much she meant to me. Our intimacy had always been good, or so I thought. We made love at least 3 times a week, and I always made sure she was satisfied. So what was I missing? I had lost my appetite, but I went into the diner anyway. I found an empty table and ordered scrambled eggs, toast, and black coffee. I barely touched the food, but I drank at least 6 cups of coffee, trying to get a grip on everything. I had never felt so lost, empty, and crushed in my life. I had heard people say they wished they were dead, and now I knew exactly what they meant. The only thing keeping me going was the thought of my kids. I had to live for them. I had to get through this nightmare Emily had created and build a future for them. That thought alone sparked something inside me, a determination to push forward. I would survive this. Emily called my phone about 20 times that day, but I let every call go to voicemail. She begged me to understand her, but she never once apologized. Not once did she admit she had made a mistake. Instead, she kept insisting that she needed that one night, and it was my job to support her. She told me they'd had sex 3 times that night and once more in the morning. She even mentioned being worried she hadn't turned her phone off in time and that I might have heard them during their first time, right when Glenn had, as she put it, done his job. She hoped I hadn't heard too much. She knew exactly how to cut me deep. It was hard to believe she had been so foolish, but at least now I had solid proof of her infidelity for court. I wasn't sure if it'd be enough, but those recordings would certainly paint a clear picture. I planned to find a good lawyer the next day and get everything ready. That evening, I visited my kids at my mom's house. She told me Emily had already called, checking on the kids and asking where I was. My mom explained that I was upset and didn't want to see or talk to her right now. Apparently, Emily had started crying, saying I just didn't understand. Mom told her that no man would understand his wife throwing an affair in his face. Emily then asked if she should come pick up the kids, but my mom suggested it might be best for them to stay a few more days until things settled down. The kids were so happy to see me, though they kept asking where their mom was. I told them she was busy with something important and that they'd be staying with Grandma a bit longer. We played games and had dinner together before I kissed them goodnight and headed back to my motel. Tomorrow was going to be a chaotic day, but before I could call it a night, there was one more thing I had to do, a quick drive-by. As soon as I spotted my house, tears welled up again. I cried for everything I'd lost, knowing deep down it was gone forever. It hurt more than I expected. I was surprised not to see any unfamiliar cars in the driveway. There could have been one in the garage, but with only the kitchen light on downstairs, it made me think Emily was alone tonight, at least for now. That's when it hit me, I still had feelings for her. No, I wouldn't take her back after what she'd done, but it hurt deeply to picture her with another man. As much as I tried to resist the urge to spy on her, I couldn't help myself. I parked a block away and walked back, sneaking a glance through the kitchen window. There she was, sitting at the table with an empty vodka bottle next to her. Her hair was a mess, and mascara streaked down her face. She was wearing a robe, her head resting on the table, eyes closed. It was clear she had been crying, with tissues scattered around her. For a brief moment, I felt sorry for her. But then I remembered her betrayal, and that sympathy disappeared just as quickly as it came. I wanted to lash out, but instead, I turned and walked back to my car, driving off into the night. There was a small bit of satisfaction in knowing that maybe, just maybe, she was starting to grasp the weight of her actions. If she needed sympathy, she could call Glenn. Monday arrived early, and I had a full schedule ahead. I grabbed breakfast at the diner, eggs, toast, and coffee, and this time, I finished every bite. Afterward, I called my mom and spoke to each of my kids, reassuring them of how much I loved them and that I'd see them soon. Then, I contacted work to let them know I'd be taking a few days to deal with personal matters. I told my executive assistant she could reach me if anything urgent came up. She could tell something was off, but I didn't go into details, promising to explain later. Back in my last year of college, I had shared an apartment with two good buddies, John and David. We had formed a strong bond over the years, even though we didn't see each other often anymore. I had studied computer science, John went into business administration, and David pursued a career in law. I decided to call John first and ask if both of them could meet me for drinks around 6. I needed advice on a serious matter, and John agreed to reach out to David. We arranged to meet at a bar by the beach. I got there a little early, and just after 6, David showed up, followed by John about 10 minutes later. We greeted each other like old friends, found a table out on the patio, and ordered drinks, raising a toast. "What's going on, John? You sounded pretty serious on the phone," John asked. "Emily cheated on me," I said, the weight of those words heavy on my tongue. "And she made sure I knew every detail about it." They both looked stunned. "Man, that's brutal," John said. "I can't wrap my head around her doing that." "Same here," David added. "That's hard to even imagine. But she went ahead and did it, with no shame." "She actually thinks I'm overreacting," I said, shaking my head in disbelief. "Can you believe that?" "So, what's your plan?" David asked, taking a sip of his beer. "I want a divorce," I said, my voice filled with determination. "And I want to teach Glenn and the others at that party a lesson. But most importantly, I want to fight for custody of my kids." "Getting custody won't be easy, John," David cautioned. "Unless she's been neglecting them or bringing random guys around the house while the kids are there, you might have a case. But if she's generally been a good mother, custody will likely go to her, and you'll be paying child support." I can handle that, I said, nodding. As long as I get to see them and be a big part of their lives. David nodded in understanding, and I felt a sense of clarity starting to form. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but I knew I had to face it head-on. The courts usually prefer both parents to be involved in raising the kids, assuming both are fit parents, David explained. What about finances, John? Asked Mark, steering the conversation in a different direction. Emily's a stay-at-home mom with the kids, and I'm assuming you've got a solid six-figure income. What do you have in your accounts? Checking, savings, investments, 401k, IRAs. When you add it all up, you're probably looking at $700,000 or $800,000, maybe more. The court will likely split that down the middle and give Emily the house and custody, he added. But, David cut in, if you can prove infidelity, and it sounds like you've got plenty of evidence, you might avoid paying alimony. Do you know a good divorce lawyer? I had asked, and it turned out David did. One of the partners at his law firm was one of the top family law attorneys in Nevada. Her name was Lisa, and David offered to set up a meeting for me. We raised our glasses for another toast, had a couple more drinks, and said our goodbyes. I suddenly felt better than I had in a long while. On the drive back to the motel, my mind was racing with all the things I needed to handle. My phone rang, and when I saw the caller ID, I knew it was Emily. After hesitating for a moment, I pulled over to answer. What do you want, Emily? I asked, cutting straight to the point. What do you think I want, John? She replied, her voice laced with false sweetness. I want my husband back home, where he belongs. Well, too bad, I said, my voice firm. Your little night with Glenn made sure I'll never set foot in that house again. She burst into tears. Don't say that, John. Don't you dare. It was just one night after 10 years, that's not enough for a divorce. Think again, Emily, I replied, cold and unwavering. When a married woman sleeps with another man, whether it's for a night or a minute, it's adultery. I warned you, Emily, and I meant it. You brought this on yourself. Oh God, please, John, you can't do this to me, she cried, but I remained unmoved. You've already done this to our family, I said, my voice heavy with hurt. You've torn everything apart with your selfishness. I didn't mean to, John, she said between sobs. I never wanted to hurt you. I just thought I could try something new. I love you. This wasn't about me, Emily, I said, filled with disbelief. This was about you and Glenn. You didn't think about me or our kids. You just felt you deserved a night for yourself, and in doing so, you shattered our family. You've lost your marriage, and probably your reputation too. Maybe someday, I'll forgive you, but I'll never forget. And I'll make sure everyone knows what you've done. No, John, please, she begged. My parents would be devastated. You can't do this to me. I'm sorry, Emily, but you should have thought of that before you acted, I said, and then I hung up. There was a deep sense of satisfaction knowing I had stood up for myself and my kids. It felt like I had finally taken the first step toward moving on from this nightmare. The next day, I met with Lisa, the divorce lawyer David had recommended. She was all business, getting straight to the heart of the matter. She asked me why I was seeking a divorce and what I hoped to achieve from it. I had explained to Lisa that I expected to divide my assets with Emily, possibly giving her the house in exchange for a reduced cash settlement. I also acknowledged that, despite filing for adultery, winning full custody of my kids was unlikely. However, I insisted on having unrestricted access to them and avoiding alimony payments. I played the audio evidence I had of Emily admitting her affair with Glenn over and over in her voicemails. Lisa shook her head in disbelief, surprised that Emily had been so careless to confess her actions in recordings that could be used against her in court. We might need a voice recognition expert to confirm it's your wife's voice, she explained. But unless we come across an unreasonable judge, these recordings should be admissible as evidence. We spent the rest of the hour discussing my goals regarding Glenn and the others at that wife-swapping party. She doubted we could win any financial compensation from them, but she promised to find a way to publicly expose their activities and cause enough embarrassment to hurt them. I told her that would be good enough for me. After paying her retainer, I requested she serve Emily with the divorce papers as soon as possible. She assured me it wouldn't take long and promised to inform me before it happened. On Tuesday afternoon, I picked up my kids from my mom's place and took them back to Emily's house. When she greeted them, she hugged and kissed them warmly, and then she reached out to me, but I stepped back, making her tear up as she pleaded with me to stay. I explained that I couldn't, but I thought it was best for the kids to be home with her. I told her I'd pick them up again on Friday for the weekend. Emily looked like she was struggling, and part of me felt sorry for her. But she had brought this on herself, and whatever she was going through couldn't compare to the pain she had caused me. On Wednesday, I returned to work. I knew I couldn't neglect my job. I needed it now more than ever, not just for the income but for the distraction. Dwelling too much on the pain of Emily's betrayal would have driven me mad, and I couldn't afford that, not with my kids depending on me. On Thursday, I met up with John and David again, this time for dinner at a restaurant near the beach. I gave them an update on the kids and the divorce proceedings. John had some good news for me. He'd been looking into ways to protect some of my money and had found a legal and safe solution. He explained that I could set up a trust for my kids, which would count as their property, not mine. That way, the money would be protected in the event of a divorce, and my kids would still benefit from it. I was grateful for his help and agreed to move forward with the plan. Together, we brainstormed ideas for stirring up trouble for the wife-swapping group without getting into legal trouble. David had a friend who worked as a reporter for a local newspaper, and he believed that if I could provide the address of the Wilsons' house and the times the group met, the reporter could investigate and uncover the names of some of the participants. David suggested that his friend could write an editorial revealing that wife-swapping was more common in our town than people realized. By hinting at the involvement of certain prominent business owners, without directly naming them, and getting photos of couples entering and leaving the meetings, we could create enough controversy to cause real problems for the group. I shared what little information I had with David, and he agreed to start digging into it. With that plan in place, we said our goodbyes until next time. The weekend with my kids was fantastic. We went shopping for new clothes, watched a movie at the theater, and spent a whole day at the beach, swimming and playing frisbee. My children were my top priority, and I promised myself that no matter what happened, I would always be there for them. On Monday morning, David called me with some exciting news. His friend, the reporter, was interested in the story and had already begun figuring out how to get photos of the couples entering and leaving the Wilsons' house. Even if their faces were blurred, folks in a small town like ours would quickly figure out who they were. If everything went according to plan, the article could make the headlines by the end of the week. I kept my fingers crossed, hoping our scheme would work and that the wife-swapping group would finally get the attention they deserved. On Wednesday, my lawyer informed me that Emily had been served the divorce papers at our house that Friday morning. Shortly after, John called with more good news. He had managed to protect about a third of my money by setting up a trust for my kids, and the process was already underway. Later, David called to tell me that his reporter friend had found out the wife-swapping group was meeting again at the Wilsons' house on Friday night. He planned to stake out across the street in an unmarked van and take photos of everyone entering and leaving the house. He also wanted to interview me again about the party, and I agreed to meet him on Saturday. If everything went well, the article could be published in the following week's paper, causing quite a stir in our small town. I felt better than I had in weeks, knowing I had taken steps to protect myself and my kids and to expose the group for what they were. Friday arrived, and I waited for the inevitable call from Emily after she received the divorce papers. Sure enough, it came. At 2:15, my lawyer called to confirm that she had been served, and not long after, my phone rang again. I saw it was Emily and chuckled to myself, wondering what she wanted. At first, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but I changed my mind. "Hey, Emily, what's going on?" I answered, keeping it casual. "What on earth did you do, John?" Her tone was anything but friendly. "I filed for divorce, just like I said I would," I replied calmly. "And I told you there wouldn't be a divorce." "You filed for adultery," she snapped, her voice rising with each word. "Spending one night with another man isn't adultery, John." "I beg to differ, Emily," I said, my voice steady. "According to Nevada law, having intimacy with someone other than your spouse is adultery. And Glenn certainly crossed that line with you." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she started to cry. "Why are you being so cruel, John?" she asked, her voice breaking. "I love you. It was just a fling. All Glenn did was sleep with me a few times." "My mistake, Emily," I replied, sarcasm dripping from my words. "I must have misunderstood. I didn't realize sleeping with someone outside of marriage wasn't considered adultery. How could I have gotten that wrong? Let it go, John." "It's over," she pleaded, her voice softening. "I warned you, Emily. I begged you not to do it, and you did it anyway," I said, my voice growing colder with each word. "Now you have to live with the consequences. And trust me, your troubles are just beginning." I paused, letting the silence linger before finishing. "Goodbye, Emily. Have a miserable life." With that, I hung up, feeling the weight of finality in my words. The hardest part was that I still had feelings for Emily. Maybe I always would. But I couldn't trust her anymore, and I couldn't stay married to someone who had betrayed me. I knew I shouldn't go to the Wilsons' house on Friday night, but I couldn't resist driving by just once to see what was going on. I also wanted to check if Emily's car was there, though I doubted she'd attend the party this time. Her car wasn't there, but she could have gone with someone else. They usually only allowed couples, but they'd made an exception for her once. Who's to say they wouldn't do it again? I spotted a van parked across the street, likely where the reporter was. I wished him luck in exposing them. The results came quickly. The next afternoon, David's reporter friend called, asking for some insider information, which I gladly provided. He mentioned that he'd taken over 100 photos and recognized more than a dozen prominent couples from town. Oddly enough, they weren't the same couples who were seen leaving the house 2 hours later. David had given him a photo of Emily, and the reporter confirmed that she wasn't among those entering or leaving the Wilsons' house that night. The reporter had asked me to describe what I'd seen and experienced when I was inside the Wilsons' house during one of the key parties. I explained the process of the keys being dropped into a bowl, though I hadn't stayed long enough to see the moment when the men picked a key and left with the woman it belonged to. Still, I had a pretty good idea of what went on from Emily's descriptions and from overhearing other couples talking about past parties. Before we ended the call, he asked if he could mention a marriage that had ended because of these parties, hinting at how kids were caught in the middle of their parents' divorce. I told him he could, as long as no names were mentioned. When the article came out in the Sunday edition of the paper, it caused a real stir. It was front-page news, with a big photo showing couples entering and leaving the house, their faces blurred. The story continued over 4 more pages, with plenty of additional photos. Even with the blurred faces, it wasn't hard to figure out who some of the participants were based on their cars and clothing. They were well-known figures in our small town. By Monday, the article was all anyone was talking about. Ministers were interviewed about the decline of morality, and civic leaders condemned the situation. Lawsuits were filed, but none of them amounted to much. Some businesses lost customers, and several marriages ended up in divorce court. For me, it felt like justice, fitting payback for the pain I'd endured after losing my wife and the family I thought we had. Even if people guessed I had been cheated on, I didn't care. I got my revenge, and that was all that mattered. Emily kept trying to win me back for months, but I stood firm in my decision. The divorce went through, and I was granted joint custody of our kids. We worked out a schedule where I had them for 1 month, and then she had them on weekends, and vice versa. It wasn't perfect, but we managed. Since Emily didn't contest the divorce, I decided against sharing the recordings of her confession with her family and friends. As for the couples involved in the key parties, some ended up divorcing and leaving town, likely because of the scandal. Emily started dating again, though I doubted she ever truly understood how much her actions had hurt me. That was her issue now, and I wished her next partner good luck. I went on a few dates myself with some nice women, but I hadn't found anyone I was ready to settle down with. A couple of women suggested moving in together, but I wasn't ready to hand over a key to my place anytime soon. After everything, I had my guard up. It had been a tough year, but I'd come out stronger on the other side. I'd learned a lot about myself, about what I wanted in a partner, and about what I could handle when life threw challenges my way. I knew I'd never forget what Emily had done, but I also knew I had to move on. I couldn't let her actions define me or hold me back from finding happiness again. As I sat on the beach, watching my kids play in the sand, a sense of peace washed over me. I knew that as long as I had my family and friends by my side, everything would be okay. I took a deep breath of the salty air and smiled, feeling grateful for the simple things in life. The future was uncertain, but I was ready for it. Maybe someday, I'd find a woman who loved me and my kids unconditionally, someone who would never betray us. But until then, I was content with where I was. I watched the sun slowly sink into the ocean, painting the sky with brilliant shades of orange and pink. It was a beautiful sight, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the small joys in life. As the sun disappeared below the horizon, I gathered my kids and we headed back to the car, ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring. I knew I was a survivor, and not even a cheating wife could break me. I started the car, pulling out of the parking lot, driving toward a future that was full of hope, even if it was uncertain. I had everything I needed to be happy, and that was enough for me. As I drove down the highway, I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror. I looked older, wiser, and stronger than I'd ever been before. I smiled, knowing I was ready for whatever life had in store for me. Turning up the radio, I sang along to the music, letting the wind blow through my hair and all my worries fade away into the night. I was free, and nothing could hold me back anymore.
What do you think about this story? Write in comments. If you don't follow our channel Cheating Room, you will probably never hear from us again. If you are subscribed, congratulations, you will not miss any exciting story. Thank you for listening to this shocking story with us. See you again.